Sorry. I have no makeup.
In half a mile, take the exit toward Blue Mountain Road, Willow Springs Road.
Sorry. This is not working out.
Take the exit toward Blue Mountain Road, then merge onto US 81.
It's like hot in my car. Actually, it says it's 79 degrees outside, and that's like...
Merge onto US 81. Frontage Road, then turn left onto Blue Mountain Road West.
Which is like weird, because that's a big difference.
Turn left onto Blue Mountain Road West, then sharp left onto US 81, Frontage Road.
Yeah. I am not. Anyway, I was just like, as soon as I heard that case about the Idaho, those kids being slaughtered, I thought it was a serial killer. I'm surprised they caught him so fast, but
sharp left onto US 81, Frontage
honestly,
Road.
with, I don't know, DNA now, and it's so hard. All the cameras, I know he definitely
Continue for half a mile.
did not anticipate the cameras being there. Why? I can't get over the fact that he would leave the knife sheath.
In a quarter mile, merge onto US 287 South, US 81 South.
That one I'm struggling with. I'm kind of struggling with that one. I almost wonder if it's not like they had everything on this guy, but I don't know. I'm not trying to spread anything, but you just wonder, like, oh, do they plant evidence? And, like, right on the bed.
Continue on US 287 South for 5 miles.
That's what gets me, is that, and now I think the order was Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, then Ethan, because of the way that they, in court, say the charges. The first charge, I think it goes in order. So the charge of burglary is first, and then the charge of the people. So I don't know. Everyone thinks it's Kaylee he was after. I'm like, what if it was Maddie? I guess what bedroom were they in? I have to, because they must have been in Maddie's bedroom, right? Because Kaylee had moved out. That's my one theory, was maybe he saw her at the Mad Greek. And so I don't know. This is all speculation. We'll find out more. But I've always been intrigued by, it's ironic because he actually has a bachelor's degree in psychology, and so do I, and so does Ted Bundy. And then they went on to, he got his master's degree in criminology. But that was in Pennsylvania. So all the research I've done actually doesn't even put him in Washington until August. And then they first get his phone that he changes August 21st. And that's the first account of him being in front of the house for an hour or something in the area. So it's was he checking out the local college towns? Because he was, obviously went into Moscow. Now he's vegan. I have literally seen people say there is no completely vegan restaurant in the Pullman or Moscow area. And a lot of people will go to Greek restaurants. I should ask my sister, she's vegan. Hey, do you go to Greek restaurants a lot? So this is just a guess, but that he was checking out the local restaurants, or and then that whole unincorporated part of the college, he might have heard like, oh, that's Greek Row or whatever. That's where they hang out, right? That's where they have parties and all of that. So basically, he just moved there. Somehow, it's just bizarre. Then he starts stalking those people a dozen times. And then the other weird part is, you know, during the time of the murders, his phone is like shut down or on airplane mode or in a metal box or whatever. And then there's a 3-hour gap again after he drove like really far in this big circle and ended up in the, like country and like by this like lake and stuff, like where I'm confident if he's the one. I mean, he's just innocent till proven guilty, but confident that he got rid of the murder weapon and his clothes and like all the evidence he could, and then tried to clean the car out. And then 5 days later he changes the registration on the car. It's just wild to me though, because
in half a mile, keep right at the fork to continue toward I-35W south.
I can't wrap my head around it. I can't wrap my head around why somebody like does those things. And then I had a lot of like trauma growing up, and I had a lot of mental health problems.
Keep right at the fork.
So a lot of people that are trying to figure themselves out end up going into psychology.
Continue on I-35W south for 1.5 miles.
That want to get like healthy. They like, a lot of people will go to on to study, and like every single like disorder, oh my gosh, I do that, I have that, you know, it's just very common. You end up diagnosing yourself with like everything. But a lot of those disorders are human nature. It's just when it goes too far to one side, you know, it becomes a problem. So there's always times where people like lack empathy or just don't, I mean, I don't know. For the most part, I feel guilty if I do something. But like when I'm in the heat of a moment and I'm like really upset and angry and triggered, you say stuff that you don't feel at that particular moment. You don't feel like, it's just out of emotion, you know? And then when you calm down,
in half a mile,
for me anyway,
toward Western Center Boulevard.
You know, like you're really upset, you're freaked out, you snap at your kids, then later you're like, the guilt comes in, you know? But for some of these people, the guilt just isn't, it's like not there or whatever.
Take exit 58. Then merge onto North Freeway.
I guess. It's bizarre. I don't know. I always end up like wanting to learn the story of, you know, the perpetrator, like how they grew up, like learn the backstory. And then
use the left 2 lanes to turn left
then I start feeling bad for them. I'm like, oh no, you know, which I don't know. So I'm not a sociopath myself, you know, because I do have the ability, you know, to be empathetic, and I have no desire to do horrible things like that, you know. But it's very common for like trauma survivors to have like traits, you know, in their personality where they question, you know, if something's wrong with them, or, you know, especially if you're like borderline personality disorder, you know, or you're in survival mode, you're like flipping out on people, pushing people away. I don't know. You're doing stuff, and then later you're like, why am I doing that? You know, am I this? Am I that? But if you're thinking and wondering if you're that, then you're probably not that.
Continue on Western Center Boulevard for 2 miles.
Because I used to always feel like worry, like if I was a bad mom and stuff, like, you know, and it's like, and people would tell me like, well, bad moms don't worry about if they're a bad mom, they're not, you know. And I think there's some truth to that, because my mom didn't get any help for herself, and I'm like, you know, working on myself and going to therapy and trying to do better, and my mom, you know, didn't. And I grew up, you know, for 14 years until I was removed. But I grew up with somebody who was just, there was just a lot of abuse and neglect, and she just blamed everybody else, and it was everybody else's fault, making her like that rather than like looking at her own part. And so I don't know, but I was listening to this other podcast that talked about Brian Koberger, and he was on, like when he was 18 or 17, he was talking on a message board, like online somewhere, talking about having this like, what did he call it? Snow. Like he saw white snow. He's talking about like that everything was all screwed up for him, and he was seeing like, he was having headaches and seeing like snow, like, and he was saying all of my problems started when I started seeing the snow or whatever, like I guess the visual issues and the headaches, and but his mental health like was really declining, you know. And then when we learned more about him, he was like 300 pounds and he was bullied, and just didn't have a lot of friends. It's always sad to see like what makes somebody end up the way they are, you know. But I guess the psychologist that was talking about reading what he wrote was saying that he was mentioning feeling like he was depersonalizing, like didn't feel real, or like felt like his life was a movie. And then that guy said that was always a result of trauma. And I had trauma growing up, so I didn't know about dissociation or like being checked out, or like I've had times where I felt like I was in a movie, like my life is a movie. Like I didn't know that was a part of like trauma though, but now I do. But I didn't really know what dissociating is. I think there's a lot of psychology terms floating around, and people think that they know, but they don't really know what they mean.
In a quarter mile, turn left on Blackwing Drive.
And I feel like if they did know what it really meant, that it would be helpful, you know. Because dissociating is like, I guess when like somebody's like really like checked out, like they're not present. And you see that a lot with like addicts and alcoholics too, because they're, I don't know, that from my own personal experience, I'm always like somewhere else in my head. Like I'm somewhere else. I'm not like always present in the moment with people, engaging in conversation. It's, you know, and it's horrible, but I can't explain it to like a normal person that doesn't understand it. And I never told anybody.
In 1,000 feet, turn left onto Blackwing Drive.
You know, I'm not really in this, you know, so I go places, sit down in a group of people.
Turn left onto Blackwing Drive.
And then those are the people that you see like looking at their phone or trying to, it's like they're not in the room. They're not present in
1,000 feet, turn right onto Woodstock Drive.
the reason why people do that have had trauma, for me, I'm talking about dissociation. Okay, for me, when I was a little kid, I grew up with a mom who was constantly screaming and swearing, flipping out, losing her shit. But then we would go to my grandparents, me and my sister would go to my...
Turn right onto Woodstock Drive, then your destination will be on the right.
Over here. Like, my mom would...
Head west on Dandelion Drive toward Old Stone Drive.
There's no other way to, like, explain it. Like, she was just nuts. So, but my grandparents were, seemed pretty decent. And my mom would just, like, my grandparents would take me and my sister, like, every weekend, and, like, in the summer and stuff. And so we would, like, live in this normal environment with grandma and grandpa, and then on the weekend, and then, like, Monday through Friday, we would be, like, with my crazy mom. And so it's just back and forth from crazy. It's like out of the frying pan into the fire, you know. It's like, oh, it's totally normal and loving and nurturing with grandma and grandpa. And then with my psycho mom, through the week and stuff. And then it was just like, my childhood was just really fucked up. Pardon my language, but I didn't realize it until, like, I'm 39 now and I'm going to therapy and I have 2 kids of my own. I didn't realize how screwed up I was until all these years went by and I had kids, and didn't understand why I couldn't be present with my children. Like, I'm never like, how was your day? And, like, really in it, you know? Like, I'm always, like, in my head, like, thinking about all the things I have to do. I'm always somewhere else. Hi, Matt. So I'm talking about dissociation, which I'm learning that I do, but I didn't understand fully what that was. So when you're in trauma, when I was a little kid, I would always be off into the future. This is what kept me going, because I knew my life was weird and I knew it was not normal. So I would picture one day in the future, it's not going to be like that, you know? So I would be like, well, one day, you know, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have a house, I'm going to have a career, I'm going to have kids. You know, it was like, it was always like living into this future, living for the future, not living here and now, living for the one day, you know. And I still do that, you know, with my whole life was like goals, like, oh, well, it'll get better when I move out of this apartment and into this house. It'll get better when, you know, I get this job. It'll be better when I make this amount of money. So I'd always, like, have this goal to obtain that would keep me going. So I have not been able to live, like, you know, in the present moment, because they also call that, like, destination happiness. Like, oh, when this happens, I thought I'd be married with kids by 40. I look like shit, right? I have no makeup right now. And I'm like 41 and single. I know, I have 2 kids, but same. I thought I was gonna, be married with kids. Like, you think of all these things, and then you're, like, living, I don't like the way I look on this fucking camera. I'm getting spoiled with all the other fucking, look at these. Oh, wow. Bubbles. I just look like, ugh. I actually have therapy at 2 o'clock. I'm talking about this guy, though. I guess he was dissociating. Okay, he's got trauma. believe it really was him. I believe it was him. He's talking about seeing this like gray snow and like how he is mean to his family. He doesn't care. He feels like he's a terrible person. He's has, you know, suicidal ideations, talking about wanting to be dead, not wanting to be here, thinking that life is meaningless. Everybody's just a pile of fucking meat, basically. And this is like when he was 17. This is a suspect in the Idaho 4. He was basically, they found like through an old email of his, like a message board that he was typing in, asking, you know, people. Really, it's a lot of pages too, like. So they did a deep dive, these psychologists, on a podcast I was listening to, and this guy was just deeply disturbed. And it's just always sad to see, for me, when you see the red flags, you know, and nobody does anything. They just turn the other way. You always, anytime there's like a school shooter or somebody that does something horrendous, there's always like a red flag. Like, oh, well, they did this, or they said that, or they wrote this essay and they seemed really depressed. You know, it's like always after the fact, somebody's quick to be like, oh yeah, we totally knew he was suffering. And it bothers me. It just bothers me as a society. So I don't know. I do end up having compassion for these people who commit these horrible acts, but I know it's just something in their psyche that's just off, and I can't make sense, and I try to make sense of it, and that's why I get obsessed about like true crime and like serial killers, and I just cannot conceive of like why somebody would want to do like the stuff that they do, because I have like no desire to like go into a house and like harm people. Like I can't even imagine what's going on in somebody's brain, you know, that would make them want to do that. But he talks about not feeling anything and like feeling like he's not, you know, like he's in a movie. And so I don't know, he just sounds like very depressed and very just deeply disturbed. So I don't know. And then he starts his first semester for a PhD in Washington, and then like right after pretty much getting settled there, he gets his he finds this target, or it's pretty quick. I would imagine if he's vegan, he is going to all the like local restaurants. And then there's that report of the guy in Pennsylvania that he was flagged for asking the girls like personal questions, like where they lived, and making the girls uncomfortable. And he called a girl a bitch or whatever when she wouldn't answer his questions. Like he was getting angry. Like, so he was in the system in Pennsylvania as known for, I guess, having a few drinks and getting a little loose and getting a little weird or whatever. You can look all this stuff up though. And then so it just, to me, I don't know, just a theory. He went into that restaurant for vegan food. I don't know, learned about that little area back there with the college towns. He could have been at those parties. I posted videos on my TikTok of like where like Maddie's not even in her house and she's talking to the police. Like there's all these other kids partying in her house. And the neighbors called the police for noise control, and it just keeps happening. It's very plausible he was partying over there for like was it Memorial Day or Labor Day weekend? September 1st. Yeah, there was like 3 calls. Each girl had interaction with the cops. Maddie, Kaylee and Xana all had interaction that weekend from noise complaints. And then the people going in and out. So I always suspected it was just the house was kind of targeted because it faced the back of the woods and stuff. But I even thought that he walked down the hill, but now I'm finding out he just parked on the street. And it all happened within like a 16-minute time span. He walks out of the car, walks in there, takes out those 4 people and walks out. It's just nuts. I can't make any sense of it. So now I'm finding out he had like really bad mental health problems when he was like 17. It also correlates with another guy talking about, I've never had a headache before, something with his eyes. There's a guy who used to be his friend who stopped being his friend, but he remembers the guy, Brian, saying something about, oh, I've never had a headache before. And then him saying, I guess the guy was like, what do you mean? You said you were having migraines. Isn't that a headache or something? And then the guy was like, you're just the worst. Brian was like, you're the worst friend. And he like went off or whatever. But that actually adds up to what he was saying with the in this thing I saw. He was saying what I'm saying is they said that they didn't know if this online thing he was on was legit, but I really think it is. These forensic like psychologists or whatever, they have a show on here. They found this guy's typing in all this stuff, talking about his like mental health and physical health and stuff. You'll have to check it out. Could be helpful if I could tell you the podcast, but I do believe it really was him. The Brian Koberger, yeah, I think it was him. They found like an old internet thing where he was talking on a message board about having all these, like, not feeling any guilt and being mean and just being a terrible person and wanting to die. Like, just, he was really suffering. And then he moves out there. The whole thing's bizarre. And what was the other thing I was gonna say? I don't know. I don't know why. That's my problem, is like, why did he want to murder people? And a lot of these psychologists will say, like, people with this type of mental, personality disorder or whatever, like, it's antisocial personality disorder, really, is what makes a sociopath or a psychopath. And then you add the other things in there. There's always features of narcissism in there. So there's not an actual personality disorder called a sociopath. It's antisocial personality disorder. But then if they have misconduct before 15, he obviously had mental health problems. He was doing drugs. He was on heroin. Misconduct is like before 15. That's in order to get a diagnosis of like a sociopath. You have to have antisocial personality disorder and basically start having like juvenile delinquency at 15, before 15 or whatever. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like you got in trouble with the law. But could a psychologist go back in time and say, oh yeah, this kid was starting fires or egging houses at 14, whatever, right? So you have to have the conduct disorder before age 15 and then be diagnosed later, like after 18 or whatever, for antisocial personality disorder, which is not an antisocial person, but it's somebody who breaks the law, doesn't have regard for humans, lacks empathy, lies, manipulates, all those things, right? Is irresponsible. So I'm pretty sure that they'll give him that diagnosis. But a lot of people that like have empathy or never are just normal, never had a fucked up childhood, they don't understand how someone can do something and then not feel like any guilt and not feel bad. That part I do understand, I don't understand. Like I had trauma. There's been some times where I've done some stuff that I didn't really feel maybe the guilt at the time when I should have, but a lot of times it's like in the heat of the moment. But that's when the amygdala is fired up and your reptilian brain is working. So then there's no like front of your brain working, like there's no logic. When you get triggered and you have a heat of the moment, like that's what a crime of passion is. You walk in, you see your spouse cheating on you, and you kill them. That is like a split. That at that point, you're not. That's when they could maybe say you're, in insanity, to temporarily insane or whatever. But there is truth to that. When the amygdala is, that's your flight or fight, that's your autonomic, is that what it is? Sympathetic nervous system. And then the parasympathetic is the other, but the sympathetic nervous system is when you're in that fight or flight or freeze, because you're going to like survive. Some people don't, they freeze up, or the deer in the headlight, then they get hit, right? There's just different. So like when you have a lot of trauma, you're always constantly triggered, and then you're thrown into that survival where you're like, so that's how I am, like, where I'm like working on that in therapy or whatever, because I will get triggered and then I'm snapping on somebody, and then at the moment it's like I don't care. But then a few minutes pass by, I calm down. Well, then the remorse, the guilt, the normal human emotions happen. But for some people that are like, I guess, sociopath, psychopath, or this antisocial personality disorder, they just don't, that guilt never comes. It's just an emotion that's not there. It's bizarre. It's definitely like brain damage, though. Trauma actually can change your brain too, but I don't know. It's that whole like nature or nurture debate, or it's sometimes a combination of both. Usually there's always some type of trauma, but not everybody ends up killing people, okay? And then there's a lot of sociopaths walking around manipulating, people left and right, but there are politicians, our CEOs, they're still not always like murderers, you know what I'm saying? But some of them are, that work for like Pfizer, I think, right? Big pharma, maybe, I don't know. There's a lot of people out there that are sick. So that's why I don't know, this stuff drives me nuts, because my whole life, I was not quote unquote normal, and I was always trying to figure myself out, and I got a degree in psychology, and then why am I attracting narcissists? Why am I attracted to sociopaths? It's just trying not to do that anymore. But back in the day, I'd end up with these guys that were just diabolical. Like my kid's dad. I mean, he's lying to my face. And I'm not really I don't qualify because I don't lie. I have a conscience, and I don't like to lie, and don't like to, there's a piece of me that's a good person, I guess. And that piece of, humanness that prevents you from like harming people is just not there in these types of individuals. And it boggles my mind. But the other thing that was driving me nuts is the girl who, like, the roommate, I'm not blaming the roommate. I'm just seeing different sides. And in the affidavit, it says she stood in a frozen shock phase. So all these people online are saying there's no way she knew her maybe not, maybe not. But I don't think that you can say there's no way. I mean, if she heard the voices, there's someone here, and everyone's like, oh, they didn't scream. We don't know, because the affidavit was redacted. Maybe there was some sort of in my opinion, there is no way 4 people were startled by a home invader, stabbed without any scream at all. I believe, like, okay, the throats could have been slit. They could have got him right away. They could have got him where they couldn't scream. It was quick. I get that. But my thing is, I feel like she heard things, didn't know exactly what was going down. It says she woke up at 4 a.m. to something, you know, Kaylee's playing with her dog. She hears there's someone here. So she peeks out. At that point, her heart rate's probably going like, someone here, what? Huh? Like, I don't know. I can only imagine. Then, what did she hear? Like, crying from Xana's room? It's okay. I'm going to help you. So at that point, I'm like, now Xana got the DoorDash at 4 a.m. So now I'm putting it up on the top floor. He walked right up to, like, Maddie. I think she might have been the target over Kaylee. We don't know why they are saying Kaylee's wounds were worse. We don't know everything yet. Maybe, then they said maybe some of them had defense wounds. Maybe Maddie was the target because the knife sheath was next to her on the bed, which I find bizarre, by the way, but whatever. Because now he's walking out with a knife with blood all over it. But my friend that, you know, has done hunting was telling me, I was asking him how you would handle that knife. I said, it makes no sense to just be walking out with the knife. Where's your sheath? And he said, if you care about a knife like that, you're going to clean it up and wipe it down. And so he said, if you're, doing that and you leave, you might just put it right here, I guess, because then there's this 3-hour gap where I think he got rid of the knife and the clothes. He had to have known he didn't have the sheath. Oh my God. That's the part. So anyway, that's the story. He goes upstairs. He takes out Maddie, then Kaylee, because it's in order. The judge kind of has it in order. Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, Ethan. So this is just piecing it all together, all the pieces together. And now you've got Maddie real quick. I guess it was quick. And then Kaylee, obviously, did she scream? We don't know. It's not in the affidavit. Everyone's like, it's not in the affidavit. Not everything is in the affidavit. A scream wasn't necessary to arrest him. I'm just getting sick of people like saying, I don't know if Dylan knew, but to say that there's no way, I don't believe that. What if she heard horrendous screaming? The dog barking, the camera facing Xana's room. They're like, oh, well, the camera didn't pick up screaming. The camera can't determine everything. It hears a faint dog barking. It hears a whimper and a thud. Okay, so whatever. If a camera's hearing a whimper, like, what did that roommate hear? So my theory is she is in her room, scared shitless, hearing there's someone here, whatever. She heard the murders, probably, okay? Yeah, psychologically, she might not have known. But then you break down, okay, Kaylee, gets it, whatever. He gets her real bad, though, because she's trying to fight. He gets Xana, and she's trying to defend, and then she gets it. Then he goes downstairs where this girl's on TikTok and happy with her little DoorDash order, eating her food. And then all of a sudden there's crying. So now she's gotten it. And then that person saying, oh, it's okay, I'll help you. We don't know. It was a male's voice. Could have been Ethan. Could have been like he heard his girlfriend crying. We don't know. We don't know. And then he turns to go help and doesn't know what he's seeing. And then he gets it, right? And then you got that third time of her opening the door where she sees him. She sees him walking around towards her. I don't think he sees her. She's just got her door cracked. And it says, stood in a frozen shock phase. At that point, if I saw a guy, and I don't want to hear he's a party goer, it was a party house. He was wearing a COVID mask he's dressed in black because everyone dresses in black. Like, what? These people are out of their minds. She stood in a frozen shock phase. There's nothing confusing about it. Her heart was racing. Holy fuck. There's a guy. I'm in a frozen shock phase. And then he walks out. At that point, she locks her door. Don't tell me there's no way she knew anything. Like, I can't deal with it. Everybody's saying maybe she didn't want to accept. Maybe she's in denial. But whatever. Now that we find out and I'm not accusing her. She's a hero. She saved her life. There's nothing she could have done other than when she heard there's someone here. If she had a gun. Or she ran out of the house with pots and pans and making a big noise. But at that point, she didn't know what was going down. She's just in her room, right? I don't blame her. I don't blame her at all. I don't blame her if she saw that guy, heard what she heard, locked her door, hid in her closet for 8 hours straight, not knowing what to do. And the guy came back at 9-something in the morning. He came back. Anyway, so she was actually smart to be staying in her room scared. I don't know. We don't know. We do not know what happened till the evidence comes out. But there's multiple ways to look at it. She could have not known what was going down when she heard those things and didn't want to check on her friend. But what makes more sense to me and why everyone's so hung up on him for 8 hours, why don't you call the police after the guy leaves? If you were truly heard what she might have heard, then saw, oh my God, it's not in my head. There is a guy here. Anybody wearing a mask, and it probably wasn't an N95. It was not COVID mask. Okay? Those kids were not wearing COVID masks back in September. It was, no offense, but this was since they wanted to politicize the mask wearing, they weren't wearing masks there. Okay? They were during COVID or whatever, but not at 4:30 in the morning or 4:15 in the morning. Oh yeah, there's just some guy dressed in black wearing a mask after the dog's barking and thuds are happening and crying. I honestly think they withheld putting the screaming in the affidavit to preserve the family from it's got to be horrific to hear the families of those victims read that. We all thought it was done in their sleep, and oh my God, they were awake. They probably didn't want to hear, and then DM heard blood-curdling scream. Right? because it wasn't necessary for the arrest. Sorry about my rant, but I had to get it out because it's like these people want to say, you don't know what shock does. You don't know what you do in that situation. But then they also want to say she didn't know anything was wrong with her roommates. Those two don't add up. Either she didn't know, then she just didn't know. But for me, when I read, she stood, she saw a man in a mask, dressed in black, clad in black. Clad means clothed. I looked it up. Clad in black, walking out. Okay, she stood in a frozen shock phase. That is scared out of your life. Then locks the door behind her. Oh, she didn't know. She didn't know anything. She just was, startled by a party goer. It's just, these people need to stop with that. I am not accusing her of anything at all. She saved her life and she got an eyewitness account. Okay? She's only 19. But I think she heard stuff. And then I get all kinds of shit from my TikTok. There's no way she would have known. Yeah, maybe she didn't want to wrap her head around that her roommates were dead. True. But I think that it speaks for itself. That she probably... Hi, Pure Country. I look like crap right now. I need to put... They don't give you a nice filter like they do on all the other... I mean, I'm okay without makeup for 39 years old. But anyway, I guess I'm gonna go because I've got to go to therapy. And, thank you. I got to go to therapy. I'm fine. I was just ranting about this stuff, so maybe it'll publish and everyone can watch my incoherent rambling. But I mean, a lot of people don't care about this case anyway, but I was just been obsessed with it. I'm okay. Thank you for asking. I've just been it's hot in here. I run some AC. It's 79 degrees outside and sunny, and it's January. I can't get past she stood in a frozen shock phase after hearing there's someone here and crying and all this, the dog barking. Then she sees a masked intruder dressed in black. And I'm buying the shock story. I am buying she is in shock, scared, doesn't know what to do. Locks her door behind her and stays holed up. Oh my gosh. My phone was frozen. It got overheated. So anyway, I gotta go to therapy.